So it's been an incredible day today, hasn't it? It's been so good. I wanted to thank you so much for joining us here at New Orleans Entrepreneur Week. Our next keynote speaker was brought down as a result of a partnership with Ochsner Health System. On behalf of the Idea Village, we'd like to thank Ochsner for their continued partnership and support of New Orleans Entrepreneur Week. I'm now happy to introduce Amy Quirk, CEO of Innovation Ochsner, who will introduce our next keynote speaker.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today, and thanks to all of you on Facebook Live. We're live streaming right now. My name is Amy Quirk, and I'm the CEO of Innovation Ochsner. Today, I have the privilege of filling in for Warner Thomas, our president and CEO, who unfortunately could not be with us today and sends his regrets, and I know he knows he's missing out today. But on behalf of Warner and all of us at Ochsner, I'm pleased to welcome you today. Before introducing Andy, let me start by telling you just a little bit about Innovation Ochsner and why we're proud to be a part of NOE and this entrepreneurial ecosystem we have here in New Orleans. Innovation Ochsner, or IO as we like to call it, is an innovation lab and accelerator within Ochsner Health System. Ochsner launched IO 2 years ago this very week during Entrepreneur Week, right here, which was very fitting because IO is kind of like a startup. It's an instigator, a disruptor, a change agent that just happens to be part of the largest health system in the state. It's pretty cool stuff. And we can thank Warner and many people in this room for making that happen. IO has an entrepreneurial culture of discovery and experimentation that we use to design new solutions to solve some of healthcare's biggest challenges. Our goal is to drive dramatically better health, greater value, and better experience for our patients and the communities we serve. So while Ochsner is a national and global healthcare destination that is a long-standing anchor of this community, in fact, we're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year, we are also on the cutting edge of discovering and implementing what's next. We do that by redesigning care to revolve around patients wherever they are, and developing convenient ways to empower them with digital tools to collect their health data, begin healthier behaviors, and live their best lives. This work has made Ochsner a national leader in digital health. We're pioneering new ways to engage the community in healthcare technology and make it accessible. Our O-Bar is the first of its kind, a place for people to learn about and get the latest healthcare technology. It's modeled after the Apple Genius Bar, and it's a place where anyone, whether you're an Ochsner patient or not, can come in and meet a genius to try a new wearable device, choose from a curated list of health apps, and learn about the digital health tools. We brought the O-Bar to NOE, and we hope you got to check out our pop-up. They'll be open on the way out, so check it out if you missed it on your way in and see what O-Bar is all about. We also partner with some of the top innovators on the planet, whether they're startups or whether they're the big companies, whether it's companies like Apple and GE and Epic, to bring even more new thinking and new tools to the communities we serve. We know good ideas are everywhere. So Ochsner, in collaboration with GE Healthcare and the Idea Village, made a commitment to help catalyze the next generation of healthcare entrepreneurs. We launched 2 global innovation challenges to engage the entrepreneurial community in solving some of the biggest healthcare challenges we face. We crowdsourced new solutions that will change and save more lives. We found the winner of our first challenge, the Wear Your Health Challenge, which we announced last year during NOE, right here in New Orleans. And Aaron Wolfson is in the audience now, and we thank Aaron for all his work, and we've enjoyed working with you. Earlier this week, we also announced the winner of our second challenge, Healthy at Home, and that award went to Dr. John Veerman in Toronto, Canada. So ideas are everywhere, and we're looking for them. And we're inspired by and enjoy working with and supporting these entrepreneurs that are changing healthcare. So with that innovative spirit, Ochsner is proud to be a part of the celebration of new thinking that is NOE, and to sponsor this keynote. And I am really, really excited to introduce our keynote speaker. who's all about creativity and innovation all the time and happens also to be a lot of fun. Andy Goldberg is GE's first ever Chief Creative Officer. As the lead creative for GE, he's responsible for pushing one of the globe's most storied corporations to reinvent its iconic brand and ensure it remains relevant in this ever-changing world. He believes in the power of storytelling to engage diverse audiences and develop connections to get consumers to actually care about you and your brand. As just one example of his recent work, and I'm sure you've all seen, Andy's the guy behind all the Owen ads that debuted last year to introduce us to GE as a digital industrial company. He's a trendsetter in his field who's known to experiment with using new, unexpected media platforms to engage his customers, like podcasts and VR apps. And he does that to tell the GE story. So no doubt that's surprising its customers, but also entertaining them and engaging them. His groundbreaking work has been nominated for Emmys, and he recently won an award at the Cannes Film Festival, not to mention numerous other awards and accolades. We at Ochsner have seen his creativity, brilliance, and passion firsthand as we've worked together with he and his team over the last year. And so it was a natural fit to ask him to come down and share his insights with all of you. And he's just a cool guy, by the way. I know you'll like him as much as we do. So I'm going to call Andy up. I'll come back and chat with him after and take a few questions from you. But let's give a warm, Noe welcome to Andy Goldberg.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Amy. It's great to be here. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to come down and represent GE, represent Ochsner, and have the opportunity to talk to you guys about not only what I do, and that's nice and that's important from a GE perspective, but really how what I do and what I can offer you as entrepreneurs in the space, and how brand, as your entrepreneurial brand, can take off if you embrace it. And that's what I really want to talk to you about, is building brands. Because you might look and say, hey, there's GE. That's one of the top 5 brands in the world. It's kind of easy to do. First of all, it's not easy to do, but more importantly, it's as relevant to GE as it is to a startup. We take the same tools, the same logic, the same learnings, and we apply them at the big brand level as you should at an entrepreneurial level. So let's talk about growing a brand in the state of life we're in today. Right now, every day, and it's an overused word about innovation, but it is constantly changing. Brands are constantly changing, innovation's constantly changing, technology's constantly changing. The opportunities you have in front of you to build your brand are constantly changing, and you have to keep up with them. And it's not easy, because every day there is something fresh and new thrown at us, whether it's a year ago when Snapchat launches, or Facebook 7 years ago, or 10 years ago now, or VR, or AR, or over the top, or different ways to just communicate are changing. You have to keep up with it. You guys are innovating through the tech space, through different forms of communication, through different forms of technology to help people. Brands need to do the same thing. GE needs to do the same thing. You have to think about your brand as an innovator constantly, as a way that if you are able to innovate with your brand, if you're able to change, if you're able to keep up, your brand will survive. The best brands do that. And that's what you have to know. But the key in that is knowing what your DNA is, if that clicks. Who knows who that guy is? Anyone? It's Edison. That's not the picture everyone expects of Edison, right? It's like the old guy with the gray hair. And the reason we always pick a young Edison is because with our DNA, we have to reflect something that is young, something that's fresh, something that's going to appeal to a constantly changing audience. Millennials coming up, they need to relate to something that's different. Our DNA is tied to Edison. What's your DNA tied to? Is it tied to you? Is it tied to your product? Is it tied to something within your product that is going to be game-changing in the future? Have that come through. Pull that forward for your brand. It is so important that your DNA is represented in your brand at all times. We never talk about Edison, but we believe in his values. We believe in the ideas. We believe in looking at what the world needs and proceeding to invent it. We believe that you might fail 9,000 times, but it's not a failure. It's just a way of learning that something didn't work. That's how we invented the light bulb. That's got to be part of your DNA as a brand, as a product, as a company. Believe in that and stick to that and have it pull through whatever you do. So you start there knowing your DNA. Once you have it, and ours is pretty clear, it's Edison, right? It's ideas. It's imagination. Imagination's in our tagline, imagination at work. And it's innovation. We believe in innovation through technology. It's who we are. And that's GE. They're somewhat generic words sometimes, but when you put it through that lens, through that filter, all of a sudden it becomes to mean something. What is your brand? What is your product? What is your company? What is your DNA? Have your DNA. Without a DNA, it's hard to have a brand that holds. We could name other companies. What are their DNAs? They come through their brand. I was at a session earlier today. Nike, they have a very clear DNA. Disney, clear DNA. Stick to it, know it, absorb it, breathe it, because not just you as entrepreneurs, say your company grows, now you have 10 people working for you, 20, 100, 200, 1,000. They have to live and breathe your DNA as that company. It can't just live and die with you. It's got to be bigger than you. It's got to be your brand. It's so important. I think too many brands forget how valuable a DNA is to their brand. And they focus on what is the widget, what is the product, what is the piece, what is the element, but not the bigger promise. The bigger promise puts you ahead. Everyone can have matching widgets. If you have a DNA, you've separated yourself. You've created something memorable because you've created something that someone can walk away with. Someone can remember you by. It's more than just the name, it's what you stand for. So once we establish your DNA, you get into this idea of purpose. Every brand has two things. Every brand has a passion and a purpose. So you start with your DNA and you have a passion and a purpose. We're going to talk about purpose for a second. The reason we're going to talk about purpose is because purpose is to the core of what you're making. It's the what. Our what is being a digital industrial company. It's saying who we are, what we are. It's very factual. It's what we believe in. It's our story to tell. Be very direct with it. If Amy mentioned the O in ads, the guy trying to get a job at GE. That was introducing us as a digital industrial company. It's factual. We entertain people, but it's factual. Having this is very easy. Having a purpose is very easy. Everything you're doing as entrepreneurs is done with a purpose. You created your companies, you created your products, you created your technology with a purpose to solve a problem, to fill a gap, to create something that someone else has not created yet, to help people, to help companies, whatever it might be. That's your purpose. The next thing is much harder. The next thing logically sounds easier, but is much more difficult to come across. And that is your passion. And you're saying, well, Andy, I created what I created because I have a passion for it. That is not your passion, that's still your purpose. Your passion ties to your DNA. Your passion is telling the world why you exist. The why is one of the hardest things to do. Most people have really hard time articulating the why. You can tell me the what all day. You could tell me everything about the what. GE is a what? GE is a digital industrial company. What's the why? Why do we do it? Oh, we make the world work better, we build, move power. Those are all what's. That's not our passion. Our passion is science and technology. Our passion is living and breathing the core DNA that Edison set forth. Bringing that imagination, bringing those ideas to life through science and technology. Because at the core of everything GE does, it's science and technology. We geek out over this stuff. Everyone in the company gets excited about this stuff. But it's the harder thing to explain because it's the why. If you have a why, you have a DNA. If you have a passion and a purpose, you have the ability to articulate your brand. You have the ability to make people care. And that goes so much further than just the fact that you have a product. The product is what you're focused on because it's what's going to deliver this. But it's only going to get you so far. It will stop once you don't have the passion and the purpose. Because the product is only the widget. You have to make yourself memorable. To be memorable, you gotta have the passion and the purpose. It sounds like, well, it's great, it's mumbo jumbo marketing. It's so important. Think about how many brands you as consumers, put yourself in the consumer mindset. How many brands do you interact with a day? How much do you go out of your way to interact with brands you actually care about and like? You spend money on stuff every day. You choose brands because you care about them, you like them, you want to wear them as a symbol of pride. Because they have expressed some sort of passion and some sort of purpose to you. Otherwise, no one would be wearing a name brand anything in here. Everything would be generic. We'd all be wearing basically gowns. You know, you'd have random shoes. Everyone would look the same. We'd be generic. We're not generic people. We like association. We like to feel something. You want to relate. You want to connect. You want your customer to connect. Connect through passion and purpose. Connect through having a brand that matters. Doesn't mean you have to be altruistic. It means you have to relate to them. You have to connect on some level to make them feel something for what you're creating, more than just the tool. The tool is the means to get there. So when you combine these things, DNA, and you split it into passion and purpose, think about, okay, Andy, I got all this. I know who I am. I know why I did it. I know my purpose. I get it. Well, how are you going to go about telling your story? For GE, it's pretty easy. I say that because I've been doing it for almost 7 years. I say that because I know our DNA, I know our passion, I know our purpose. I know how to bring things to life, whether it's in TV, VR, AR, you name it. I can come up with ways to articulate it. But one thing I can tell you is, if I ask anyone in this room what GE does, they might be a little confused. Because a lot of you might know us an appliance company, a light bulb company. My friends here from Ochsner know I'm a healthcare company. We're a B2B company. I don't think a day in my life since I've been at GE I've ever marketed GE as a B2B company. And I think every one of you, as you think about, am I B2B, am I B2C, what am I? One thing I would tell you is think about your audience. What is your audience? 9 out of 10 times, your audience is human. I fundamentally believe every brand, no matter what they do in the world, they need to market to humans. They are human audiences. That's your dog food. You're still selling to humans, by the way, because they need to buy it. Your audience is human. Think about what people want. Think about how people engage. The best example I can give you is I run TV spots on Sunday Night Football. Why would a B2B company run TV spots on Sunday Night Football, the most consumer-driven piece of television out there? Because C-suite executives are watching. Because they're human. No one goes home at night and turns on a different internet. No one takes their brain out of their head and leaves it at work, goes home and does something different. No one stays at work and goes, for 9 hours a day, I'm not engaging with anything that I would normally engage with in my non-work hours. Our lives are intertwined. They're intertwined with work, they're intertwined with family, they're intertwined with friends. You need to market to people and talk to people about your brand as though they are there 24/7. You don't know when and how people will interact with your brand. So think about that. Think about when you're going to reach them. There's no set time or day. There's no magical hour. You need to relate at the moment that they're ready to relate to you. That's why you always need to be human in your approach. You need to be human in your brand. You need to be human in your DNA. We didn't get into what is a digital industrial. I just said that's what we are. That's a fact. Nike's an apparel company, sporting good company. That's a fact. it might be 5 in the morning when I interact with Nike or 3 in the afternoon. They have to present themselves the same way at all times. Apple, same thing. Always, always think about how your brand is presenting itself at any time of day. And that's going to be the connection point. That's going to be the moment that it happens. And you don't want to show up thinking, oh, well, wait a minute, but that was 8 in the morning. We need to be different at 3 in the afternoon. No, you're you. Be human. Tell your stories in a human way. Tell your stories in a way to connect. So the stories I tell have to connect. They have to make people feel something for GE. What's your story? Your story is not a widget. Your story is not your product. Your story's the why, the passion, the make people think, the make people care, the make people respond, create emotion in your story. You can do it in an elevator pitch. Do it any time you do it. Every single time you want to tell your story, have some emotional connection. Gets people to remember. People don't always remember fact. They remember emotion. That's a big difference. Always tie that in, weave that in. It's super important. I tell you that because brands sometimes forget. They think, oh, but I got the next thing that everyone wants. Okay. But then the next thing after that's coming the next day. You've been left in the dust. That doesn't help you. You will be remembered if you have a story. You will be remembered if you build a connection point. You'll be remembered if you make it easy for the audience to understand you. That's your brand. That is what brand is all about. Build your brand now, because in a few years, as you build your products up, your brand has to be with it. You can't wait for your brand to catch up. If your brand is built at the beginning, you have something to hold on to as your product evolves. You open up a berth for that product to grow. If it stays narrow, your brand is limited. Your opportunity gets limited. That's why we talk to startups all the time. That's why we talk to entrepreneurs. We want to give them that advice and take something back from them. Give them their, it's a two-way street. We can share and share alike, but you have to be open-minded to create that wide berth for your brand. It's super important. Now I'm going to turn to Amy, who's going to come up, and we're going to have a little chat.
So nice job, Andy.
Thanks.
Very good. So I have some why questions for you. You keep talking about why,
Yep.
On everything. And, many companies and entrepreneurs, we're not all GE, right? And many of us are just focused on our products, as you said, and building products that our customers will love. That's what many of us get up to do every day, and that's a passion in of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, why? Why, if you have a good product, why does your brand even matter?
It's the never-ending question, and I love it because everyone can have a good product. And I'll use an example we talked about the other day. I kind of like it because it's fun to compare. If you work out nowadays, you wear dry fit clothing. And if there were 4 t-shirts up on a rack, and they were all the same, but one's Nike, one's Under Armour, one's Adidas, and one's generic, the brand is the differentiator. The brand makes you pick one over another. Technology is the same. Assume all things equal. And usually they are. There's different names. Nike's got dry fit. Adidas has, I don't even know what Adidas's one is. But you get the idea. Climax or whatever. There's no difference. That's what the brand does. And the brand made you pick one over the other. So you have to assume, as great as your idea is, and trust me, I'm sure all of your ideas are brilliant. Someone out there in the world is probably doing something similar, or going to do something that might one-up you. And the difference is the brand. The difference is the mark you leave on your audience. And the moment that they start thinking you are just, this bottle of water versus this bottle of water, there's no why. So building that brand now is exactly why you have to do it, because you have to leave that indelible mark. Because your product is going to evolve. You can't stick with one product forever or one version of a product. You look at how products evolve, they have to change to stay with the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And without the brand to keep that moment in time, you have to change that product every time. You have to change your brand every time. You'll never get anywhere. It literally will be a commodity. And you don't want to be a commodity. You want to be something of value.
Well, I love something that you said was people remember emotions. They forget facts, but emotion sticks with you. Emotion matters and resonates and drives that connection that you talk so much about. You also talked about story a lot, right?
I love story.
I know.
And story is an underrated piece of brand.
Why does it matter?
Because story is the only thing people really remember. So, oldest story in the world, the Bible, people know. It's a story. People recall stories. If I spat off a bunch of facts about GE, it would be interesting for a second. But if I don't wrap it in a story for you, it doesn't stick. It doesn't hold. And I think, what I love about storytelling, and it's an overused term now, let's just be honest, everyone's throwing storytelling out all the time. But what I love about great storytelling and great marketing for storytelling is that people will talk about it. It's water cooler talk, when there were water coolers. But it's something that when you sit at a dinner table, people tell stories. Stories just what the human brain feeds off of. And when you're a brand and you can weave your brand into a story, it leaves a mark in that brain, and it leaves a mark on people to say, I want to be associated with that, or I remember that. You might go out to dinner at a cocktail party and someone told you a story over drinks. The next day, you will recall that better than someone who just said, hi, so-and-so, we have 700 million in assets. It doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. Facts are not a story. Stories separate brands.
Stories build connection, build memories, build emotions. So a company like GE, right, still has to tell its story.
Absolutely.
So what is GE's story?
Our story today is, and I say today because we're 125 years old and we've evolved, and you have to evolve as your brand evolves and your company evolves. Our story is being a digital industrial company, and most important, that, like I said, that's our purpose. But our true story is every day we go to work to make the world work better. And whether that's through healthcare, power, energy, or transportation. And to have that passion in our workforce and our technology, that is our story. And we have to figure out ways to tell that story and re-articulate it to different audiences all the time, no matter who the audience is.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that you do kind of use unconventional media platforms.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the chief creative officer after all, right?
I kind of have to.
Yeah. So how do you keep fresh? I mean, I would think you need to keep it kind of fresh.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing that I have to do and that my team has to do. We spend a lot of time looking at new technologies, new communication tools. I would tell you the biggest thing we do is we test. We have zero concern about failure, because 9 out of 10 times what fails no one has seen. So we will test out new social platforms. We were on Snapchat really early on. I think we were on when Vine launched, even though it's gone now. We were on Vine day 2. Most brands would research and quantify. Sometimes you just have to try stuff and put yourself out there and be willing to experiment and learn from those experiments and change. And that's part of how we stay fresh. The other part is we look at what everyone else is doing. We pay attention to what's going on in the marketplace. We look at, is there something coming down the road? Is there another brand we're jealous of? And we go to conferences. We meet with entrepreneurs who are coming up with new technology. We were just at South by Southwest. We'll go to other festivals and other areas and we look outside of our world. We go to music, we go to art. We try to learn from culture and what can that bring to us.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, I think, you mentioned failure, right? And trying new stuff and experimentation. And, a lot of people don't really like failure. I don't know how GE feels about it, but just talk to us a little bit about, living that culture of experimentation and discovery and learning and treating learning as a metric and how that's received in a company like GE. Because I know, many of us in the room are trying to bring that type of environment where we can be learning all the time. And just what are your lessons?
Yeah, so no one likes to use the word failure because it has such a negative connotation. I don't believe it does. I actually think some failure is good because if everything's a success, then you've hoodwinked yourself. But I do think testing and learning and iterating is the most important thing you can do as a brand. Sticking with the same tried and true and staying with that over and over again, you're basically just revisiting your same playbook and you're not evolving. And you have to develop new playbooks. So really, the idea of failure is, there are certain areas where you can't fail, right? We have businesses where we cannot fail. Aviation, can't fail. You need success. Marketing's different. Because we're so inclined to test and learn, it allows us to put stuff out there that we might be, I would tell you, not confident in, and allow that to let the audience take it where it wants to go. It's not fun having failures, by the way. No one likes it, but you have to do it to learn, because then you haven't pushed yourself up the chain and further along to say, this is risky. This might be out of our comfort zone. If everything stays in your comfort zone, you probably are not pushing yourself hard enough to make something work. And I would tell you, just from a brand perspective, I always encourage people, get out of your comfort zone. Get out of your, if it feels really nice and cozy, it's too easy. Because it's what you're used to. And you need to get beyond that to really make a mark.
Well, speaking of kind of experimentation and new thinking, you and your team launched a VR app recently to tell GE's story. And New Orleans has a burgeoning VR scene. There was just a panel in the other room talking about that, and it's something we're excited about fostering. And I think many people are trying to think about the different use cases, right? That we can use that technology. Talk to us a little bit about your thinking, how you used it for GE, and how we might start to think about VR broadly, so I think that's of interest to this community.
Yeah, so we started playing with VR as a storytelling tool. We started a few years ago, and we really we realized it's an opportunity to bring people to something that they normally can't get to. So originally we said, let's take people to our facilities in VR. Let's take people to where we build a locomotive. Where we build jet engines, where we build gas turbines. And that started out well. And then one of the challenges we saw was the scale of VR just wasn't there. Most of you have probably tried it now, but it's not readily available. So the first thing we did was, how do we scale? How do we get people to experience the GE story at scale? And sometimes you have to do that through partnerships. So our partnership was through the New York Times, and we distributed through the New York Times 1 million Google Cardboard headsets.
I have one. You gave me one.
I gave you one. And in that, we launched the app. The New York Times went all in on VR, and it allowed us to put our story with the New York Times. It wasn't like a sponsorship. It was us and the New York Times equal billing. And it gave us the scale we were looking for in VR. And if any of you have done a Google Cardboard headset, you realize it's not the greatest VR experience. So we kept playing, we kept experimenting. We've played with HTC Vive now. And what I've noticed about VR, now that it's still not there yet in a scale perspective, but it's getting there, is people have a very, very hard time understanding how to storytell in VR. Because you have to be prepared for someone to go like that or someone to go like that. And that's an unusual thing. But when you start to embrace that, you can start to bring people to places that they don't get to. And then most recently, we sort of jumped in head first and went into like full movie mode and went to the passion side of what I was talking about and did science experiments in VR. And I will tell you this, as interesting as it is and as good as it is, that is still an experimental phase for us. We're not there yet. From a business standpoint, we're playing with it in building locomotives and building gas turbines by having someone in the States work with someone in India through virtual reality. But again, it's early days. But I think when you experiment, you learn. And if you're not willing to experiment, you're not really willing to learn.
So, you know, this room has got a bunch of entrepreneurs,
Yep.
And you know, we've heard you about experimentation, about finding not only your purpose but your passion, about thinking beyond the product. But what advice do you have for them? I mean, if you just to get down and dirty and make this really relatable, I mean,
Sure.
what advice would you say to,
I mean,
to the entrepreneurs in the room?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, like I said, know what you want your brand to be about. You're all working on something that is of high value to you because you're an entrepreneur. You believe in what you're developing. You know, you didn't go work for the big company. You said, I'm going to take this on myself. So if you're taking that on, why did you do it? What is so important to you that made you say, I'm putting a stake in the ground, I'm betting my life on this? You made that conscious decision. Put your brand behind that. Be proud of that fact because you're so proud of what you're building, what you're creating. Articulate that through story. Articulate that through your DNA, through your passion, through your purpose. I mean, I talk about these passion and purpose things all the time. We talk about it on our team all the time. Because if it doesn't fit into that DNA, then we probably shouldn't be talking about it. And I would tell you guys the same thing. If it doesn't fit, why are you working on it? Make it fit, make it work, make it part of your story, make it why you woke up in the morning to build what you're building. It sounds fairly easy.
So use it as a barometer
Yeah.
for new projects that you take on.
Anything you take on, any evolution you take on with your product, with your company, make sure it's fitting into that. If it's falling out of that, you have to question why are you doing it? Because that's not why you started on this path.
So to you, brand is just pivotal from the beginning. It
Yeah,
determines-
brand is more than marketing. Brand is more than a logo and a name. Brand is a purpose. Brand is a position. Brand is your mission. Brand needs to stand for something because brand adds value. And the value you are going to get out of your product is only enhanced by your brand.
So for people in the room that again, may be in
Yeah.
a startup environment, you're saying a brand is, you know, so pivotal. And I guess my question is, how do they determine their brand? Obviously, they go to the core, right?
Yeah.
What am I about? Why am I doing this? Why do I get up in the morning? And what am I passionate about? But a wrong turn on your brand and your identity could be you know, pretty disastrous,
It could
I would
be.
think. So what's the advice? What's the process
So
that
he-
you would say to somebody that's maybe starting small?
So here's the
or-
good news about starting small.
Okay.
You have the ability to iterate on your brand. That's the best news you have. Because you can test and learn on if your brand's resonating, on if your story's resonating. Try it out on people. I hate to say it, a 125-year-old brand, you don't have that luxury. Because people have preconceived notions.
Right.
Luckily, you don't. And take advantage of that. Practice your story. People underestimate the power of what your brand can bring. Your product might not be as good as your brand. And your brand can bring your product through. And maybe little tweaks to that story will enhance your product, will change what you're doing. You might be in a meeting and someone give you a piece of advice about your product that changes your brand a little bit. And that's okay because you're at that infancy stage. Or vice versa. They might say, hey, your brand's really interesting, but your product's not living up to it just yet. Take that advice and figure out how to form your product to answer the brand. Brand is much more than a logo. It's much more than a tagline. It's much more than just a piece of creative. It truly is what you have to stand for. I think people forget that. People forget that, when you go off and hire lots of people because all your companies are very successful, those people have to believe in your brand first and foremost walking in the door.
So it's internal and external.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brand permeates everything. Please don't underestimate that. I think sometimes people forget. They're like, oh, well, then you're literally, like I said, you're just a commodity. Yeah. And you aren't developing what you're developing to be a commodity. You're developing what you're developing to have a unique position. And that's where brand can separate. And that's why brand is so important. I've worked on a number of brands over the years that have really strong staying power. And they have amazing loyalty and great loyalty. And they have worked so hard, those companies, to build those brands. And they've started sometimes from nothing. And sometimes they don't work. But every brand knew who they were, what they were, and why they were to be.
Brands are powerful.
Brands are really powerful. I mean, there are some brands that are really powerful that you wish they weren't. But look at, I'll give you the
Should I ask?
No, you don't want to ask. So there's a listing of powerful brands in the world. Interbrand puts out the top 100 brands in the world every year. We always look at it. It's very important to GE. We're in the top 10. It's exciting. Apple and Google are at the top. We're 10. Our brand is worth $43 billion. That's not our company. That is what the GE brand mark is worth. It's out there. Everyone can look it up. Google and Apple are so far beyond that number, it's unbelievable. They're in the hundreds of billions of dollars, just their brand, not their product. Their brand. If I say to you, Apple, something pops into your head, a vision, some sort of image, and not just the Apple, but their product, their story, everything. Same with Google, Nike, Coke. Every time I say one of those words, something's popping in your head that's different because they've spent time establishing their brand. It's not about the product. It's an emotion that was created. Create that as you start out your companies, as you start your journey. All of these companies started at something very small, but they had a brand first.
Interesting. It's an external tool, it's an internal tool, it's an asset
it's
in and of itself that leads to financial stuff. So Andy Goldberg is clearly got a great perspective on brand, and we've got a microphone here in the audience if there's any questions, and I know we've got some people watch on Facebook Live, so if anybody's got questions for Andy, just feel free to step up and we'll call you out. One thing I do want to ask you, Andy, while we're waiting on questions is, how does GE, or how do you specifically work with startups?
So we spend a lot of time just meeting with them, whether it's for marketing ideas, for business ideas. We have a group called GE Ventures that actually looks at startups based on our main core industries, energy, healthcare, transportation, to see what might be great synergies. So we really play a lot with startups to see what they can bring to the table, and it is a two-way street. We try to offer the scale that startups are looking for.
So you talked in your talk about you're a B2B brand generally, and it seems like you're going more on a B2C route, or maybe a to human route.
Yeah.
Right. Tell me about that transition. Was that hard to convince others in the company that was the right path?
It wasn't hard to convince, because one of the beauties within a company like GE, and I would encourage other companies to believe this, is when you start to explain to people that everyone is a person. When you sit with a C-suite executive and they're just flesh and blood and they can relate to you on regular things, you start to realize that to tell your story, to tell GE's story, it's an easy thing to convince people of. It's not a hard thing. When you get technical, you kind of lose them a little bit, because people, again,
Right.
they like story, they want
Right.
emotion.
Right. Okay. Looks like we got a question.
Yeah, since most of us startups don't have time, talent, money to do everything,
Yeah.
Right.
like GE, what's the first thing we need to do to establish our brand?
So I will go back to sort of what I started with. Identify what your mission is and what that DNA is. Because that is going to dictate so much of what you do. You don't need to do all the marketing GE does. You shouldn't have to. And it is not easy. But have that mission, have that purpose that is so core because it is your DNA. If you stripped away everything from GE and took away all our marketing, everything we did, the DNA wouldn't go away. Our reason for being doesn't go away. Have your reason for being.
What's your favorite piece of creative work you've ever done?
So it was about 2.5 years ago. It's a film called, and unfortunately, guys, I'm sorry, it's a film. I'm going to ruin everyone and tell you it's not some cool little thing. It's a TV spot. It was called The Boy Who Beeps. And it was unique because it was a 2-minute film.
Yeah.
We never cut it down. We ran it 3 times on TV, on football, and then we ran it in movie theaters. And to me, the reason I loved it was, other than when I saw the edit, there was like nothing to change. It was perfect. It was the GE story. It wasn't trying to be something it wasn't. It was about a little boy who's born and he beeps and he can talk to machines. And then at the very end, there's just a wonderful moment where he's laying next to this girl. He's like probably 12. And they look up at the sky and he beeps and all the lights go off and the whole sky lights up and she goes, thank you. And he finally says, you're welcome. And it just makes you feel something. And
I watched it last night.
it's great.
Yeah, it was pretty
And
special.
honestly, my kids love it. So
Yeah.
like, it's just like an easy
yeah,
win.
Yeah. We got another question.
Yep.
Great keynote, by the way. So as a creative and
Can you speak up a little bit?
Just, yeah.
as a creative in a marketing agency, I'm often faced with one day I'm working on like a really cool company where there's a lot of place to play with, but the next day I have to work with a dentist's office that they don't even know their story, but they know they want marketing, and you're supposed to come up with their story.
Yeah.
So, as the first person in your role, what steps did you take in taking GE from those preconceived notions that it's not an exciting company to what it is now?
It's a great question, and I'll tell you, I've worked on some doozies. I had laundry detergent and dishwashing detergent in my career. Here's the thing. I could tell you could make a dentist's office exciting. You have to have someone who really cares about the story they want to tell. So, you know, when I sit down with someone for the first time and tell them what GE does, I go really big and broad. I say, did you know we power 1/3 of the world? That's kind of exciting. Do you know a plane takes off every 2 seconds with GE jet engines on it? And it starts to get the imagination going. And yeah, GE's big and it's great. And I understand the challenge you're in. But what I would say is, what makes that dentist office exciting? What's the lifeblood? What's the pulse that's operating in there? Give me some insight. Give me something that gets the dentist juices flowing. You know? I'll take, you know, if you're in a hospital, there's a lot of stuff you could focus on. That could be the mundane or the boring. But someone finds every bit of that interesting. Find new ways to unwrap it, uncover it. The best thing I would tell you is, if you really look back at all the GE work, it's very repetitive in our storytelling. We're telling the same story over again. We're trying to reinvent ourselves every time with a new story, but it's the same story. Do the same thing. Find that little piece of nugget that goes, you know what? That's kind of cool. It's not easy, and it is fun. Like I worked on Brand Jordan, right? That's cool. That was kind of boring because everyone knew it and everyone knew what to expect. Throw an athlete in, great. It's harder to work on stuff that doesn't seem interesting, but it ends up being more creative and more interesting. Push your client, by the way. Tell them not to get stuck.
Great job, by the way. I was actually at the GE power and water plant in Austria a few years ago. I never thought it would be so cool.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi there. Great presentation, a
Thank
lot
you.
of gems. One of my all-time favorite spots, not just for GE, but any time, was the Millie Dresselhaus spot. And I don't know if you had a hand in that, but it's
Yes.
brilliant
Thank you.
storytelling. It's powerful, and it makes you think. Can you tell me and tell us a little bit behind the thought process with that?
Sure.
Because it fits everything you just said about finding those gems and those nuggets and making them fit your brand.
Yeah.
It was just beautiful.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, myself and my team, and kudos to my team for working on that and the agency, BBDO. It's a beautiful story.
Well, tell us what it is.
For,
You wanna
yeah,
tell
for
us?
those of you who don't know, Millie Dresselhaus was the first female winner of the National Science Award. And really what we wanted to do is, our goal in the brief was to elevate scientists to celebrity level. What we find all too often is we are more obsessed with the Kardashians than people who really make a difference in this world. And we felt Millie Dresselhaus was the epitome of someone who really made a difference in the world. Her name was the Queen, she was nicknamed the Queen of Carbon. I mean, just a beautiful woman. Sadly, she passed away a couple weeks ago, just after the spot launched. The nice thing was she was in the hospital and she saw the spot for the first time air during Saturday Night Live with her family by her bedside. But our goal was to really celebrate the uncelebrated. And we want to shine a light on people that have done so much for the world that are never appreciated, that should be appreciated. And at the same time, we launched an initiative for GE to hire 20,000 female engineers and science people by 2020. And sort of what we're calling balance the equation. Thank you. So we're really proud of the Millie stuff. We're really proud of the initiative itself. The insight really was to celebrate the uncelebrated. And she was the perfect epitome. And I find a lot of great work like that, you have to have a single protagonist. If you try to just do a blanket and cover the world and cherry pick, you don't have that emotion that comes through in something like Millie.
It was great, and I love how you wove it back with a purpose and a mission that celebrates women, and the timing with International Women's Week,
yeah.
and it was just brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're getting the hook.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah. But thank you, Andy,
Thank
for inspiring us, for challenging us, and for being here part of Noe. And thanks to all of you,
Thank you.
for coming out today. Have a great rest of the day. Talk to you soon.
One last question.
Do we have time, do we have time for one more question? I think I got the hard fix.
Sorry, and my name's Alex, and then you really impacted me right now as far as I usually fall in love with people's stories, like from the ground up to